On today's episode, we talk with Byron Ybarra, a friend who works diligently to recognize and rectify the past, to empathize with others, and who looks for a flow of new experiences in each moment.
I mean, there's definitely still a lot of anger I need to work through. Like I lived my entire life angry, and I've, only just scratched the surface of the very big things. Like, I think the biggest thing is, in terms of anger in relationships right now, is I don't speak to my mom. That's not something I'm interested in changing, but that is something I need to process a little more, I think.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Humanity Skudu. Today with us is our wonderful guest, a longtime friend, Byron Ybarra. Byron, how are you?
I'm doing good, man. How are you?
I'm great. Also, an important question is, did I pronounce your last name correctly?
Uh, yes, actually, I can't roll my R, so I can't do it. So thank you for doing
Oh, okay. So I actually was
it.
superseding your ability to
Yeah.
pronounce your own last name. That's very good. Okay. Um, Excellent. Well, this is exciting because I actually have not done the podcast for a while. If anybody's listening to all these at once somewhere in the future, you will not notice a lapse. But for me, it's been several months. So, at your request, actually, to get back into this felt like something really good, really appropriate.
Mhm.
Um, and so, with that, we are here this evening to talk and to just get to know you and your life and what it's all been like, and just see how it goes.
Yeah.
So, are you having a good evening?
Yeah, I mean, I just got off work, so I'm pretty tired. Um, but I'm excited. I got a flight coming up in 2 days. Tomorrow for me, because I don't go to bed till 6 a.m. So, but
That's really early, or really late, I guess, depending on how you look at it.
yeah, I work second shift, so my shift starts at 3, and I get home at like midnight.
Oh, gotcha. Okay,
I don't like going to bed right
excellent.
after work.
Well, yeah, that's fair. You give yourself some time to sort of unwind,
Hmm.
watch a movie, play a video game, go jogging for a couple hours. I'm not sure what you do, but actually, what I would like to do
Hmm.
is, since it's actually this is going to be kind of nice. It's been a while since I've really caught up with you. Is can we learn a little bit about you? What are you doing right now for work?
Am a diesel mechanic for Penske.
Right. Okay.
Basically, what my job is, I'm a Tech 3, which is the lowest level technician. My job is to just go through the trucks, do preventative maintenance, inspect them, make sure they're all up to DOT spec. And if they're not, we write them up so someone who's better than me can fix it.
Better than you. Okay, so you are basically helping diagnose as a whole.
Uh, sort of.
Okay.
Depends on like what I'm doing essentially is just making sure trucks meet DOT standards.
Okay.
And I do like basic stuff like oil change. I'll change tires, change out
Okay.
lights,
Yeah.
stuff like that. But
Some basic stuff you got
yeah.
going down.
Mhm.
Okay. How long have you been doing that for?
I started it when I was living in Texas in October of 22, 21. Yeah,
Okay.
a year and some change, year and four,
Perfect.
6 months.
Okay. That's pretty good. So you feel like you're at this point you're doing a pretty good job with sort of being comfortable, not just doing sort of like basic mechanic work, but also being able to diagnose pretty accurately in the event that you need to send it up further.
Yeah, yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
I kind of fell into this career path on accident, and it was extremely intimidating when I first started because I didn't know goddamn thing.
Okay, so you
But
actually you had no like experience or like any sort of level with this prior to this actual job.
basically, no. I mean, my first job in mechanics was at Valvoline, which is pretty much just oil changes.
Okay.
And then I worked at a couple dealerships, just basically just oil changes again. And
Okay.
then suddenly now I'm working on big rigs. So it was a
Interesting.
huge leap up, and I didn't know
Sure.
much.
Okay, so you're normally working for like every citizen's car, and then suddenly you're now doing like 18 wheelers.
Yeah, with they got federal standards you have to meet. And the scariest thing they ever told me at work is like if you PM a truck, you go inspect and you miss something DOT and something happens, you can go to prison.
You can okay, wow. So
I
like
could go to
it's
prison if I screwed up really badly.
So it's not even like they just write you up or they fire you, but like you go to jail if a guy's like tire flies off and you didn't catch it.
Yeah, if a tire flies off and kills somebody, that's I'm going to jail.
Okay, so if the tire flies off and doesn't kill anybody, like is there still like a penalty?
Probably I would imagine because
Okay, I was gonna say
there's
okay, so
I'm
you might
certainly
only
at
go to
least getting
jail.
fired.
Yeah, at the very okay, yeah, I would imagine that makes sense that there's gonna be a fairly deep consequence. But as long as nobody is like dead or injured, you might not go to prison.
Yeah,
Wow. What
that's
kind of sentence is I mean, you might not know, but like, would it be like a year or 5 years? Like, what
I would imagine that depends on the severity of the
secondhand manslaughter if a tire flies into somebody's head?
yeah.
Huh. Okay. Do you feel like that's something that really makes you nervous? I mean, as far as I'm concerned, that would make me tremendously nervous if the stakes were such that, like, if I sold somebody a game and like I don't know, they ate a DS game and got sick and then the FBI comes crashing through my walls and sends me to jail, I'd feel really nervous about like everything that like might feel sort of innocuous or inconsequential, but suddenly if like you have these high stakes that sort of heighten it, is that been intimidating for you, or does it make you sort of buckle down further and you feel
It
like you get better at the job?
it was intimidating at first because that wasn't like a thing with regular vehicles. They just come in, would fix it, company would pay for it, whatever.
Hmm.
I wouldn't go to prison over that. But the basics of my job, what I'm doing on a day to day, minus some exceptions, is fairly simple and it's fairly
Okay.
routine. You're
Okay.
walked through it on a headset. Um, but what it did do for me is I have always had a habit of kind of cutting corners, not necessarily to a point where like I'm causing problems, but just
Sure.
making things quicker, a little more efficient. But you can't do that with these trucks.
Sure. Um, so do you feel like did you ever think years ago that you'd ever enter a car job that would have this kind of like level of consequence? Because that would never occur to me that any sort of like mechanical job outside of like servicing like the president's airplane or
Right.
something could carry like a federal consequence.
No, I mean definitely not. I never even considered DOT was a thing
Sure.
until, I started at working on diesel trucks.
Yeah. Okay. So as you've been doing this, is it something that okay? So because you said that you've never like this is not a job that you really like sought out. Maybe I don't know if like maybe you at one point decided, hey, I want to get into this. You said that you sort of fell into this.
Yeah, so when I first moved to Texas, I was staying at my cousin's place. He was putting me up while I, got on my feet.
Hmm.
And I was just looking, seeing what was hiring, and I ended up applying to Valvoline. I had changed oil before on my own cars, so it wasn't like that far to the roam. And then I really enjoyed that work because I was working with my hands. It's the same reason I stuck with when I was working with pizza for so long.
Oh yeah.
I like the physical work, and I like fast-paced environments. It keeps me busy. So I
Okay.
enjoyed that job. I enjoyed the people I worked with, and I just kind of stuck with that field ever since. And yeah,
Sure. Okay. So like the busyness, because this is something that's kind of cool to think about, is that like jobs are something that there's always sort of like a contentious conversation with people, which is not everybody wants to work, which is fair because like not everybody wants to feel like tired. They just want to live. They want to make sure they
mhm,
could live a life without having the need to like, bust their brains all day just to survive. But at the same time, there are people who do thrive on the activity. Maybe it's good for like mental health. Maybe it's good for like physical coordination or physical strength building. Um, but it sounds like you've sort of leaned into the idea of saying uh I want to be active and not just like contributing something, but like you really like the actual physical hands-on
yeah,
activity. Okay.
it's
And so
it's they're
you said
good.
pizza as well was part of that. um and that's kind of cool. Is that so before this car job, is there like anything that you had maybe sort of like looked into as like this is sort of like the dream job, this is like the goal, this is sort of like the end game uh that you're striving for? Was there something hands on that you really like had sort of like had in mind?
I mean, not really. I've never really had a big goal. The only thing that was ever like that for me would have been boxing when I
Oh,
was
that's right,
chasing that
yeah.
for a while. But as for specific career paths, no, I never really. It wasn't ever something I gave a lot of thought to.
You just sort of did what was in front of you, and just
Hmm.
like you're fine, sort of being like, whatever's there is there.
Yeah, it's still sort of the same
Sure.
today. Um, Primarily, the reason I've stuck with this company for so long, it's the only job I've worked at for more than a year. Um,
Hmm.
it's because the people are nice, when you don't talk about politics with them.
Sure.
Uh, but people are nice. They're really helpful. The job's good. I enjoy it. I'm fairly good at it, I would say. I mean, I'm better. I'm learning. I was really bad at it when I started,
Hmm.
but all that, and it's guaranteed 40 hours. Got benefits, all that stuff. And now that I've moved north, now that I've moved to Ohio, the shop I'm at now is union.
Okay.
So
So that's
that's
nice. You have
exciting.
like some sort of like protection, and
Yeah.
you feel like you're part of a group that actually has your best interest in mind and is not trying to maybe exploit your ability or skill.
Yeah, not that I felt that Penske was ever out to get me, but just
Sure.
the added bit of security is nice.
Yeah, that sounds really, really nice. Okay, so I mean, one thing that you and I have discussed an awful lot, because like a really common thread between us was our friend Michelle, who
Yes.
many people know passed a couple of years ago, but she was actually a very common thread between both of us. Shared a lot of philosophy, and this podcast is sort of like a spiritual follow up to something that Michelle and I had started years ago. Um, so talking philosophy and like your own personal construct of like who you are is something I wanted to get into a little bit.
Sure.
um and I think that you've actually just tapped into something already that I think is really interesting, with saying that like you are very go with the flow, you are very fine not focusing or even hyperfixating on I need to get this job, I need to do this thing, this has to happen or I won't be happy.
Hmm.
You seem very able to just sort of say, well, here's where I am, so this is what I'm going to do, you
Yeah,
know?
it's been a contentious point in a lot of relationships I've had.
Yeah, I can only imagine. In fact, actually, how does that kind of thing like really work out for you? Because a lot of people are very goal driven, and it might be really hard for them to find somebody that can focus on literally task at hand, but be completely okay with like a nebulous sort of future, with just whatever happens happens. How does that worked out? Like, and what kind of discussions has that brought up for you?
The first one that comes to mind is with my most recent ex.
Hmm.
Lovely person. Love her to death to this day, and
Sure.
we're still good friends. But one of the um, a conversation that we had that like really like solidified in my mind that this was not going to work out in the long term.
Hmm.
We just started talking about future plans in general, not necessarily ours, just the way people come across those things. And my sort of philosophy has always been that, well, hers is she wants to secure herself right now, young, so that she is set for the rest of her life. She can do the things she wants.
Hmm.
And my philosophy was sort of almost completely opposite to that, in that
Hmm.
I am more concerned with doing the things I want to do now when I'm young, when I'm able, because tomorrow is never guaranteed. I've
Sure. So you're very focused on the philosophy of you might not get a second chance to do it. So in the moment is the time to live.
Yeah, and we were just going back and forth on that, and
Hmm.
she said, that's why you hedge your bets so that you can secure yourself now. You hedge your bets in the fact that you're going to be here that long so that you can do those things. And
Sure.
my response was, I understand. I guess I just don't find that bet worth taking.
Do you think that stems from anything like an experience in your life where something might have changed the idea of like long-term security for like an instant sort of, you know, things have happened, you've had friends or loved ones or family members that have passed and they never got the chance to, and it maybe kickstarted you into the philosophy of, the here and now really is the only thing. Because of course both camps are totally valid,
Oh, absolutely.
but like, do you think that anything sort of in your life had sort of pushed you in that direction, or is that just how you've always been?
I'd say a little bit of both. I know that early on in my like later childhood, my dad had pretty successful windows and doors business. He had a shop in Cruces, El Paso, Albuquerque.
Hmm.
We were doing fairly well, and then all of that was gone. when then we were just living, pure poverty, government housing, things like that.
Hmm.
So there was no security with that. Even, working as hard as he was, as successful as he was, it could only
Sure. So
garner
when
him
you
in.
say everything was gone, like what happened to sort of like remove that security and stability from you? If
Uh,
I may ask, of
no,
course.
yeah, of course.
Oh, good. That's the point of the podcast.
Yeah.
So excellent.
the it was a number of things. The inciting incident, I would say, for this and a lot of things in my life would be the death of my brother
Oh
that
yes. Okay.
affected my dad greatly, and uh, a lot of illnesses came up pretty soon after that. Things that I'm sure would have come up regardless, but with the stress and the grief and everything that came after my brother's death, probably kick-started those. So then he couldn't
Okay.
work anymore. He was, his mental state was gone. Took him a long time to start to recover from
Sure.
that.
How did that affect you specifically? Because it sounds like your dad took a pretty big mental hit from that, but like in terms of your response to that, what was that like?
I had only Well, I met him once. He stayed with us for one school year.
Okay, so you didn't like grow up very closely then.
No, he
Okay.
he has a different mom. He lived with her in Chicago,
Okay.
and he was gonna come live with us, but he went back the summer and just didn't come back. I guess my dad said he didn't like how strict my dad was. My dad was really strict back then, so I
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
can definitely see that.
Sure.
But I mean, it wasn't like I wasn't affected. It was very I was hurt, because I did get along with him.
Hmm.
But most of it was just seeing how it affected my dad, who at that point in my life, I don't think I had ever seen him cry.
Oh wow. Okay, so that must have been like a really jarring thing,
Yeah, I
just for you in general on several levels.
yeah, we were living in either Las Cruces or Albuquerque. No, we were living in Albuquerque and we were visiting family in Las Cruces. We were staying in a Motel 6 and I was woken up by my dad sobbing.
Oh wow.
And I was like 10 years old and I looked at him and he sees me and he says, "Rick's dead. They killed him."
Oh wow.
I just remember this vividly because it's the first time I've ever seen my dad like that. And I also
Sure.
remember, and this is a little messed up, but I was half awake. I wasn't really processing what was happening,
Right.
but just the look on my dad's face, my 10-year-old brain was like, "That's a funny face," and then I went back to sleep.
So it didn't even like register with you. There's a cognizance when you're 10 years old, but also like that's a really big thing to intake fully. And
Hmm.
so I can only imagine there was a lot of stuff that like was not being fully processed at that point, which makes a lot of sense.
I
Um,
Yeah, I mean, I definitely understood what had happened.
right.
I don't really think I ever, not that I can remember any, I don't think I ever cried about it.
Hmm.
'Cause I felt very removed from him and his death.
Sure. But then you saw what it affected, how it affected your father, and then what that did to affect your family. And as such, you just realize that like all it takes is an instant for everything to change.
Yeah.
Okay. But before then, was it something that like you felt like with Dad's family business, you guys were, hey, we're good, everything's clearly going fine right now, therefore the future is fairly well secure. And
I
then, and that was that sort of like a moment that really changed that for you.
uh, I'm not sure that I ever really thought about I mean, I was like 10 years old, but I
Sure.
do
Yeah.
know that like, we weren't hurting for money. Our pantry was full. My dad was, buying me the games I wanted, everything like that.
Hmm.
Um, and it was just, we had our own place, and then now we're living with my grandparents. Now we're
Gotcha.
living in a camper in my grandpa's backyard.
Hmm. And so how does that affect you in sort of as being young and looking at that situation and feeling helpless because like you can't get like a legal job, and
Mhm.
it's hard to feel like you can't contribute to something in some way because you're simply not able to, as like a young citizen, able to do a whole lot. I mean, uh was that something that you felt was like a really big struggle for you in just like how did you feel, like what was that like, not knowing or maybe knowing what to do? Like what I guess what was that, what was it like for you?
For I didn't really come into like fully grasping our situation until I was in high school, I would say. maybe
Sure.
late middle school. But it I was very angry, just constantly, even before I had fully recognized what was happening.
Hmm.
Um, and
Who were
it's
you angry with?
everything
Just
really.
life?
Yeah,
Just
there's
hands dealt?
yeah, anger has been a very pervasive emotion throughout my entire life,
Hmm.
and it teenagers are angry in general, but I felt like it was just ever present.
Yeah.
And like
What? Yeah.
it got worse when I became a teenager because then, I could have my own bank account and everything like that. And the first hit on my credit was a loan my dad had to take out that he never paid.
I see.
But I had to do what I had to do to help us out because it was
Hmm.
that or rent or
Right.
electricity or internet or
Sure. So you felt sort of maybe thrust into a responsibility that as a young person you might not have been ready for.
it was a responsibility I had no control over.
Sure. Sure. That, yeah, that makes sense too. Um so yeah, that sounds like a pretty problematic thing to like sort of be forced into.
Hmm.
And you said anger was sort of like a really present component of who you were at that point. Um, and right now, as far as I'm concerned, it seems like life has evened out for you and smoothed out for you. At the time, though, like what were you doing? Was it something that you felt you recognized, or did you recognize it in hindsight? And if you did recognize it, like what what were you trying to do to like circumvent it? How did you confront it? How did you deal with it?
I made it everybody else's problem.
Oh wow, okay,
Yeah, I I was an asshole in high school,
sure,
more
sure.
than I think most teenage boys were. Um, I had friends, only a couple of them still speak to me from that time,
Hmm.
and I would get swallowed up by these friend groups just by virtue of I have this one person I'm close to, and I would
Hmm.
just get swallowed up by these other people. And at best, most of those people, if I didn't form some sort of friendship with them, I would just find them inoffensive. Like that's fine. We're just acquaintances. But at worst, if I didn't like them, I would make it almost a mission for them to hate being around me.
Interesting. So there's sort of like this vindictiveness, and not targeted specifically because they did something. It was you were responding to your anger just at other people.
Hmm. And it wasn't even just them though. They got it the worst. I
Mm-hmm.
was, I was mean to my friends. I was just terrible to pretty much anybody I met
Mm-hmm.
at that time. And like I said, a lot of people just ended up dropping me. The only two people I speak to are some of my closest friends today.
Sure. And knowing that they sort of stuck with you through this whole thing, have you discussed that with them? Like sort of what it was like at that time? Have you guys sort of like, is it under the rug? Is it elephant in the room? Like, what is that conversation like?
I have asked them before, why, what on earth possessed you to still stay my friend when
Hmm.
I was treating everybody like that, and they both of them understood because they were in similar places. They just expressed it a little bit differently than I did.
Sure.
Um, so it was a sort of a kindred spirit thing, and we've all forgiven each other about how we treated each other.
Sure. That's really a very powerful and strong thing to do because I don't necessarily think that people who feel like they're being treated poorly need to stick around or need to even like, deal with that to the point of forgiveness. But it's certainly a grace when you find people that choose to, or that
Absolutely.
can tough it out. But it also sounds like, they understood simply by virtue of association.
Hmm.
They had their own, scenarios they were going through. Um, do you feel that at any point like they were bad enough to you to where you extended that same kind of grace to them?
I, no, those two, like two specifically, we were never really awful to each other.
Oh, okay.
Not much, anyways. Not as much as everyone else were.
They just saw your struggle in a way nobody else could.
Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha. At what point did you sort of recognize what that looked like in yourself, and then what was your plan to say, "I want to be better"?
It wasn't until my early 20s.
Okay, yeah,
I
that's fair. I think sure.
I mean, I had been, I would say, steadily improving, but I was not good. Just improving as, you grow older and grow more mature and more aware of yourself.
Right.
Um, but it wasn't until my early 20s when, I had been through a couple abusive relationships on my end and one on theirs, and just losing a lot of friends. And I was like,
Hmm.
there's a common denominator here.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and that's a really big thing to be able to recognize, because I think it's very simple for, I'd say, anybody at any point in their
Mhm.
lives. Everybody at some point has sort of felt like other people are slighting me. My perspective has to be the right one. It's everybody else who's the problem.
And it
Um,
wasn't even that I wasn't aware that I was being mean.
uh-huh.
It was just that if you talk to 17-year-old me and you're like, hey, stop being an asshole, it's like, it's just who I am. That's just the
Okay, right.
way.
So you were
Yeah.
willing to shirk the willingness to be better. It was just sort of like, this is an unchangeable factor.
Yeah, yeah, this is who I am.
Okay.
I'm a cynical asshole, blah blah blah.
Yeah. But it sounds like at some point, like, you decided to examine that and then maybe opt to, we'll say, grow out of it. I mean, at
Hmm.
least address it because you recognize that it's harmful to others and ultimately to you.
Yeah, that was the biggest thing is I I was still very angry into my 20s and even to an extent today. Um,
Hmm.
it was more of like I can't let this take the people I care about away from me anymore.
Mm,
Because I had, you know, and there I lost so many people just because of the way I acted, and they were well within rights. I have no, not angry with them for doing that. I
sure.
would have done the same thing. Uh, it's just I can't. This is not sustainable for me, and it's certainly not sustainable for the people around me.
Hmm. Do you feel it was sort of taking a toll on you emotionally? Because it's a lot of upkeep to be angry. I think
Yeah.
uh, in the past, when I've had anger things that I've had to sort through, it is exhausting and it's difficult, and it's really it's so much more effort to hold on to bad feelings consistently. I think sometimes it's easy to feel like, oh, it's effortless because I can just be mad at things, but like, it takes a really heavy toll on emotional, physical,
Mhm.
and even spiritual levels.
It's yeah, it's exhausting. I was really scared to let a lot of anger go because it had been the fuel for most of the things I've accomplished. I've done so many things out of spite.
Hmm.
I've pushed myself forward when, my life had just crumbled apart because I was angry.
Hmm.
And just, it was scary to let all that go because, what would I have to push me forward if not the one thing that's pushed me forward my whole life?
So in a way, it sounds like anger was part of your identity because that identity helped you fuel progress, but it was fueled by something negative.
Yeah, definitely
Fueled
is.
regardless, but okay. Um, yeah, and so I mean, that's anger is a tricky thing because I think people get really nervous talking about anger, like, oh, I don't want to be an angry person, and I think all of us hopefully do not want that. But anger is a part of life. Anger is a part
Mhm.
of things. Anger is something that we all experience, and we should experience it. It's a very important emotion to,
Yeah,
I think, recognize.
I don't think
Yeah,
anger is inherently negative.
right.
It's,
Yeah.
like I said, you can use it as motivation. Um, it just can't be the sole driving force,
Hmm.
is I guess the way I would put it, like it was for me.
Sure. And I mean, maybe it can sort of promote you or position you to want to be better. Ideally, though, the goal may not be to do it at the expense of others.
Right.
Yeah, but yeah, anger is it's funny because, yeah, that subject I think I've always looked at in my life until I'd say recent years as, oh, I'm not angry, because anger is negative and negative is unbecoming, without realizing that anger is an important part of the emotional spectrum.
Absolutely.
And so suppressing it and withholding it is actually just as damaging because you're disallowing something that is important to move forward or to get past things or to understand people. Um,
It's
so would you say that at this point in your life, obviously no one lets go of anger entirely. You have to be on some sort of crazy Zen level to be able to entirely do that. But is it something you feel you have much more under control, or at least you understand it better at this point?
I definitely at least understand it better. I've been trying to let a lot of it go. A lot of this did not happen on purpose.
Sure.
It's like when I was writing out that big old Google Doc I showed you. Uh, I
Oh,
wrote a-
yes, yes.
I wrote about in detail my first serious relationship that was very mutually abusive and destructive to both of us.
Hmm.
And when I was writing it, I was physically angry, which is it's one of the primary ways I feel anger. It's a very physical emotion to me. Like my body will shake.
Sure.
Sometimes I'll cry, things like that. I was feeling
Yeah.
that as I was writing it down. Um, and then a couple weeks later, a memory had come up from that relationship, a positive memory, and it didn't make me angry for the
Oh, good.
first
Okay, so you
time
were able to
in.
separate the.
Yeah, it was this date we went on. We stayed up all night. We just couldn't sleep, and we're like, "Fuck
Mhm.
it, let's go to the zoo right when it opens." And it was a good day, and that was the first time in nearly a decade that I could think of any part of that relationship and not be angry. So
Interesting. Okay.
it was like I finally expressed a lot of it and just got it out of me.
Yeah.
And what that ultimately culminated in was I sent her a very long apology for the first time. I don't
Wonderful.
know if she's ever read it. It doesn't really matter, but
Sure. It was sort of a way for you to express, to get it off of your chest, to acknowledge how you feel, to take ownership
yeah,
of your feelings.
yeah, and it was I had always said, when I would talk about that relationship, I would say, I was abusive to her. I wasn't that good. But
Mhm.
it was always followed by a but,
Mhm.
and that I took responsibility in a sense, but it was like, oh, but she did this, so
Right. Yeah, there's a back and forth, a
mhm.
justification, a reasoning of some sort. Have you gotten to the point where you can look at that now and just be like, I did what I did, and that's all on me. Anything she did, that was on them, and I cannot control that. My faults are my own fault, kind of thing.
Yeah, and there was another relationship, another person I apologized to for similar
Hmm.
reasons, but this was
Mm.
the abuse in this relationship was almost exclusively mine. It was the relationship immediately after the mutually abusive one.
Oh, gotcha.
So it was just kind of, shoveling that onto her. Um, and while I was, you know, drafting an apology in my head, I looked through some old messages between me and her, and I felt sick
Well,
just by, the things I was saying and doing.
yeah, yeah. At this point, I mean, like looking back at all that right now, um, this is always such a really difficult question because you have to assume that like younger you would never want to necessarily listen because you are where you are when you're that age, and advice means nothing until you have a reason to hear it. But if you could look at where you are right now and go to talk to yourself at that time, like what would you say? Like what would you at least want to try to impart?
That's difficult because I don't know that I would be where I am if I wasn't the way that I was.
That's fair. I think that makes sense.
And I would say I'm in a fairly good place. It's, yeah, it's not really something I've ever thought about.
Hmm.
Just because I've always been a very it is what it is person. You know,
Would you say like to younger you maybe along the lines of, uh, the anger will pass, or um, it's okay to feel this way, just temper it in such a manner, like is there something like thinking back that you wish you would have known, assuming that it wouldn't change where you are right now, but just something that maybe makes you feel like you just didn't have the right equipment or tools to deal with it?
It would probably be just some sort of reassurance, not
Reassurance, sure.
necessarily, I certainly wouldn't listen if you told me to change my behavior,
Yeah, I don't think anybody young actually would ever do
but
that because that's where you are at the time.
like I said, I don't think I would be where I am if not for the way that I was.
Sure.
So I think the best thing I could say to myself back then is just, it's not always going to be this way.
Yeah. And so, what do you think it is at this point? Like, because anger is still part of life, anger is part
Hmm.
of it. What do you think the biggest contributing factors to you dealing with anger now are? It sounds like you said writing things out, um, whether it's sort of like a personal autobiography of some sort, or apologies to people you feel that you've wronged. Is writing sort of like your primary expression at this point of sort of laying it out in front of you and looking at it, or is there something else that you do to sort of deal with it?
It's definitely always been writing. I also had this really old blog that I started when I was like 18.
Hmm.
Um, and wrote a lot of my thoughts in that. And I hate reading it now because I was still an asshole. But
Sure.
which is why I've separated and put the new writing somewhere else.
Yeah.
Um, but it's been that, that's always helped me process my emotions, which has been something that's always been profoundly difficult for me to do.
Hmm.
It's
Do you think that was something that was sort of suppressed growing up? Like you weren't supposed to show emotions? Is that I think a product of society or something you were never taught? Something that was just never present in your life?
No, not at all. My dad has always been very encouraging of
Hmm.
expressing emotions, probably because, he was taught the opposite.
Sure.
Like when I was in little league, if I got nailed in the crotch by a 40-mile-an-hour fastball because I was playing catcher.
Oh. Mm-mm.
First thing my dad said was, "It's okay to cry. You just got to get up."
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and that's the sort of idea I've always clung to. I don't cry. I just don't. I've never shown my emotions much, so I don't cry much. But I've never been ashamed of it when I do.
Sure. Is that something you felt you've gotten better at as far as expressing emotions, or do you still sort of like withhold them until you're in a place where you want to deal with them in your own way?
It's I don't show them freely, I suppose.
Mm,
It's got to be right place, right time. I try not to suppress them.
yeah.
I just try to control them, I suppose.
Oh, I see. Do you think that's impacted relationships that you've had with people, or is it something that in a secure relationship, whether it's a friendship or a romantic one, that you can open up to that, or is that something that has still maybe been some sort of blockage for you?
It used to be a problem.
Okay.
It used to be a huge problem because I was just very bad at talking about how I felt. And I'm still not great at finding the words, but
Hmm.
I'm able to speak to it a little more, able to make the effort at least, and that goes a long way. I wouldn't even really try before because I was
Sure.
I'm just going to be stuttering and stammering the whole time.
Yeah. So, like I said earlier, a common thread with us was our friend Michelle, who, as of this recording, passed away about a year and a half
Mm.
ago. Um, she was a really largely positive influence in, I think, your entire family's life. Very notably, we did a couple episodes with her and your dad that we
Yeah.
talked about a lot of stuff. But obviously, she had a huge impact and influence on you. Do you think there are things that she might have taught you in terms of like dealing with emotions that you can look at and go, oh, like what she provided with me helped me sort of like learn how to cope with things or learn how to address them or acknowledge them.
Uh, yes, but not directly.
Hmm.
Not like when I spoke with Michelle, she was never really trying to teach me anything.
Right.
What we were talking about was mostly my dad because that's, the subject of all the work she was doing. She
Right.
was getting my perspective on things. But I Michelle was ridiculously easy to talk to.
Yes.
Like the fact like I thought about it for weeks. The first time I had that, one-on-one conversation with her, how easy it was for me to open up to her
Hmm.
blew my mind. I'd never done that with anybody.
Sure.
And it wasn't scary. I wasn't concerned, And while we were talking, it's shifted to me more than my dad because I was the subject of a lot of the things he learned. You know, they were
Hmm.
passed on one way or another. That's just how the topic shifted to me,
Hmm.
and I just kept talking and talking, and that's not something that I do.
Yeah, there's that interconnectivity to it all. But I think also Michelle had a way of sort of helping people feel safe and secure in a way that very few people have, like that I've
Absolutely.
ever experienced. It was really remarkable. And you know, this podcast episode especially isn't exactly about her, but the influence that she held over both of us, I think, makes her a very pertinent sort of middle ground for you and I to sort of discuss, you know, philosophy and,
Mhm.
you know, how that sort of shaped us and molded us. Because as I understood it, as she was helping, you know, talk to your dad and your family, inevitably there's influence with what she did, her insights, her perspectives, and her feedback. It didn't just touch your dad, it touched you, whether it was conversation with her, conversation with your dad. You
Mhm.
know, the things that I heard when she talked to you or when she talked to your father, those things influenced me. It was a really remarkable and beautiful um, method that she used because she was so welcoming and so open and so non-judgmental. What kinds of things do you think you may have taken away? I know it's kind of like a big and sort of broad question, but in terms of what she provided for you for listening or coping or whatever that might have been, I mean, during the time of all of us talking about
Mhm.
um, your dad's struggle and what that looked like, you know, what was your biggest takeaway? I think from that, if you can cite that.
I think probably just that, you know, people are trustworthy. You know,
Yeah.
that was always and still is to an extent one of my biggest issues. Like I have really close friends that know very little about my life
Hmm.
and you know what I've been through. Like I went to Chicago recently. My brother's buried up there, and I went and saw him. And I told one of my friends, uh, I'm gonna see my brother while I'm in Chicago. And they're like, "Oh, are you cool?" Because I don't talk to my other half siblings. So they asked, "Are you and your brother cool?" I was like, "I should hope so. He's 6 feet underground." And they were like, "Whoa, I didn't know."
So
I was like, "That's
you sort of blindsided them with
yeah,
this
yeah."
information. Yeah.
I didn't realize they didn't know because it doesn't come up in my mind to talk
Sure.
to people about that.
Sure. 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 What was that like, going up and sort of confronting? I mean, when you went up there, um, you know, how long had it been since you'd had to really sort of like have that in mind, have him in mind?
I don't think about him often,
Okay.
bec- but I know that his death was a catalyst for a lot of things that happened in my life.
Mm.
And when I made the decision to go see him, I was terrified.
Yeah.
And it's
What do you think scared you the most about that?
probably what year was it? About 13 years worth of trauma that I was about to face.
Mm.
And it was difficult. It was harder than I thought it would be.
Hmm.
Just, you know, walking up to this little memorial on the ground. I didn't stay very long because it was 16 degrees and windy, but
Oh, that sounds nightmarish.
yeah,
Yeah.
no, that made it that much worse.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
I don't know, I didn't say much. It was more just like I guess processing a lot of things that I never realized that I hadn't.
Yeah, I can only imagine. That seems like something difficult to like suddenly be thrust back into, especially if it was something you were never truly close to. You were sort of close by proxy through your dad about the
Yeah,
whole thing.
and
And then
we
suddenly you get your own one-on-one, and what does that look like? What does that feel like, you know?
yeah, I mean we never went to his funeral. We never visited his grave before.
Hmm.
So that was it was very much a first for me, and it was I still don't really know how to express what it was like. You know,
Sure.
it was fairly recent.
Yeah. That's I wouldn't know where to begin. I wouldn't know how
Yeah.
to think about that. That's a really tough one. I'm impressed that you were able to even go do that at all. I think it's a really good thing that you were able to, and even if
Mhm.
you quote unquote took nothing away from it, you obviously, there is something that happens regardless.
Yeah.
I think maybe even the bravery to approach it at all is noteworthy.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's something that you know it's not unremarkable. It's not a small thing. Even showing up to look it in the face, I think, is a much bigger and scarier thing than maybe sometimes we're prepared for. And it sounds like that's sort of what that is.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely the first time I cried about him in a very long time.
Have you talked with your dad about it since that moment?
No, I'm not even sure if he knows I did it, now that I think about it.
I see. I'm gonna forward him a copy of this the moment it's done, and then he'll know.
Okay.
And he might listen, of course. I have no idea. I'm not, gonna
Yeah.
gonna force your hand and be like, "Hey, check out all your son's secrets on my public podcast." But
No, I have a fairly open relationship with my dad, so like we talk a lot.
that's really good. I mean, it seems like, yeah, that one thing that I noticed about you, because I'd met you obviously a while before I met your father.
Hmm.
In fact, I didn't know a whole lot about your dad other than you guys came over and helped
That I
tile
that I
my old
had one.
house. That you had a father. I knew that you had a father, and I was really impressed. I was like, wow, that's so cool. Um, but I didn't know a whole lot about him or any sort of background. And so when Michelle started sort of like taking on this I don't want to say case, but this discussion,
Yeah.
she really opened up this discussion and made it something that was so important to her that we made a podcast, a section about it. But I'm really glad to hear that you and your father are close and open, because I think that can be trauma can do so much to a family that
Mhm.
either brings you unbearably close or can absolutely destroy the dynamic and you never talk to one another again.
Yeah, I mean,
So
this last year, me and my dad had quite a bit of strain in our relationship, but we were able to move past that. It was,
sure, yeah, conflict isn't necessarily bad. Conflict maybe helps you sort of like strengthen the things that you have to figure out how to work on.
yeah, no, it was very, very difficult to
Yeah,
speak to him for a little bit, but the
yeah,
fact that we were able to move past that, I think,
yeah,
is great because
that's
I
incredible.
I wasn't interested in losing my relationship with my dad over anything if I can help it.
That's really important. Yeah, that's sort of makes you reprioritize the things you feel you have to say, just because sometimes it can be easy to say, well, you need to hear me out.
Right.
Or as you cited earlier, when you were younger, this is just who I am.
Hmm.
But as people, we get to choose who we are. And you don't just say, oh, I'm stuck with it. You can say, do I want this to shift?
Yeah.
That's wonderful. At this point, it sounds like you are really doing remarkably well. But like any person, we're never completed projects. We're always works in progress. Um, what do you think it is at this point that you want to focus on? Having all of this stuff that you've just talked about that you've acknowledged very directly. Um, what are things you feel like in this moment you still might struggle with when it comes to maybe emotions or openness or communication or resentment or anger? I mean, there's so many possible things.
I mean, there's definitely still a lot of anger I need to work through.
A lot of anger.
Um, like I lived my entire life angry,
Hmm.
and I've only just scratched the surface of the very big things. Like, I think the biggest thing is in terms of anger in relationships right now is I don't speak to my mom. That's not something I'm interested in changing, but that is something I need to process a little more,
Hmm.
I think. It's especially difficult because my parents are still together.
Oh, gotcha. So speaking to one of them but not the other can be really
Yeah.
tough. I gotcha. So you wouldn't necessarily, if you were to visit them, what would that be like? Because clearly
I
that would.
I have visited them and
Okay,
I ignore my mom and she goes into the room and
I see.
it's essentially that. The most awkward interaction I had with them is when I was still with my most recent ex and we went to California to my dad wanted me to come to California to see my grandma before she passes.
Hmm.
This was at beginning of January of last year, Yeah, the worst month ever.
Right. Yeah. Really bad one for a lot of people. We can attest to that. Sure.
But my girlfriend came with me, and my girlfriend knew about my relationship with my mom and how non-existent it is, and I was like,
Hmm.
I am gonna try to keep you guys apart, but like you don't need to be rude. If she speaks to you, you can speak to her. I know you're concerned with impressions and all that. You do you, but I I'm gonna try to put a stop to that.
Yeah.
And I did it first when we arrived at the airport and my parents picked me up. My mom tried to introduce herself, and I got in between them,
Hmm.
and that was the extent of that. My mom didn't speak to her much, but she did speak to her. My girlfriend replied very curtly but polite, as
Hmm.
she, but it's a very difficult couple days in California.
Yeah, I can only imagine. Now, is this something that, and I never want to, cross boundaries, of course, when it comes to this topic of conversation. Is it something you feel you're interested in finding a way to reconcile, or, like, because you live very much in the moment, as you've said, should something happen to either of you, would you want to leave it sort of like this open-endedness, or is there room for reconciliation, or is that a priority, I suppose?
I this I struggle with this feeling sometimes because it
Mm,
I have no interest in having her in my life.
sure. And you have the prerogative to do that. I think
Yeah.
it's, that's an important thing to say as well too. Is I'm not sitting here trying to play armchair counselor
No,
and
I
being like,
yeah.
here's what you got to do. Yeah, because yeah, you have every right to say who is or isn't in your life,
And the thing
and
that
no one, yeah, gets to tell you
yeah,
otherwise. Yeah.
yeah, the thing that makes me feel bad sometimes is sometimes, I'll think when she would say stuff like, "Oh, you'll regret it if something happens to me." And my first thought is,
Mm,
"No, I won't. I
sure.
have no regrets about burning this bridge." And
Do you
but just
sometimes think that's like anger responding, or is it like just honest responding?
a little bit of both.
Mm,
Um, there would probably be a bit more compassion once I work through the anger, but I don't foresee any reconciliation.
yeah. When it comes to working through this kind of stuff, is it isolating for you? Or do you
Yeah,
talk about it with anybody? Do you have like therapists or close confidants that, like, do you ever talk with your dad about this?
I have talked to my dad a couple times about this, not at length,
Hmm.
just because I feel that would put him in a really weird position, and I'm
Sure.
not interested in making him choose.
That's fair.
But I do have a couple friends I speak to about. Like I said, I write things down a lot, but
Right.
it most of the time processing my emotions in general is very much an isolationist thing that I do.
Hmm.
I I am constantly thinking.
Yeah.
So there's always something running through my mind no matter what I'm doing. And I've realized a lot of things just out of nowhere about, my emotional state, things I've been trauma, things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you keep yourself fairly focused at this point with your job as sort of a way to, excuse me, I just put some saliva in my lung against my better judgment.
That's where it goes.
I thought it in a moment that it did, but I'm opting out of that now. So, where's my train of thought? with with your sort of constant desire to keep busy, do you think that's something as a response to not necessarily wanting to think about things, or does it give you time to also focus on thoughts in addition to being busy?
It allows me to think.
Okay.
Keeping like if I have, something to occupy my hands, my mind is free.
Hmm.
It's very much an ADHD thing, I think. Um, but like I'm fidgeting with a paracord bracelet right now. But I'm always
Oh,
fidgeting with
gotcha.
something so
Yeah,
that I
always
can
want something going on.
focus.
Sure. So you're a multitasker.
Yeah, I have to be or I'm a mess.
Certainly. You had one simple goal, and it was just to focus on that. So yeah, this is this, it sounds like you've got, like anybody, you've got a road ahead, but it also seems like you have a decent, I don't even want to say plan, because you don't have a plan as I understand it. You have the now, you have the present, and the present is a good enough plan for you to sort of just enjoy moment to moment.
Yeah, I mean, if I had a plan, I wouldn't live in 3 states in as many years.
That's totally fair. Yeah, a lot less impulsive. Do you think, would you consider yourself impulsive, or would you say you're somewhat calculated?
I am horrifically impulsive.
Okay, you just do
It
literally
is,
whatever
it's,
spur of the moment.
yeah, it's something I've really had to get a control of because my spending habits were bad.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
They still
Yeah.
kind of are, but I'm making it work.
Yeah,
Like
absolutely.
I just dropped $400 on a plane ticket to Arizona before I even got the days off.
Oh, yeah, there you go. Yeah, you knew what you wanted. You'll find a way to make it work.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah. Would you say that you wish you had like a better balance, or is this something you're just like, hey, this is who I am and I enjoy it, or do you want to change it, or have you changed it to this because this is what you want?
I wish I had more disposable income.
That's totally fair.
It's, you know, I don't necessarily regret the impulsive decisions that I've made most of the
Hmm.
times. It's just a matter of sometimes I make them when I can't afford to,
Right.
and I just have to deal with the fallout of that.
You just sort of deal with the consequences.
That's
But
that's
ultimately,
it's future
at
Byron's problem.
at this point, okay, that's fair. Well, you know what? I heard something as well. I might have cited this on a different episode, but when I was listening to another podcast regarding Kevin Smith talking about his desire to make the movie Clerks, something that he had said, it was like, well, I'm really worried about, whether or not it's going to be successful, whether I'm going to recoup the money that I've spent to do this kind of thing. And he put himself in this sort of constant state of worry. And his sister at some point, like, sort of addressed it and said, look, the goal is to do the thing. So do whatever it takes to do the thing. Whatever you have within you,
Mhm.
the goal is to get that out. And as long as you get it out, you're good. And he sort of like, recoiled and said, well, sure, because even if like it's a financial mess, which luckily it wasn't, he said it's just money. And money you can regain. You can
Yeah,
figure that out. Like money obviously helps us sort of secure even moment to moment. But in the end, money is still just a thing that can be figured out,
yeah,
and it was most important that he did what he felt he needed to do for himself. Now he had a plan, but also allowed himself to maybe also impulsively, do what it took to make the plan happen, regardless of consequence,
yeah,
potential consequence. Is is that something that you feel that maybe you can also relate to in a way, like, or do you have anything that you want to do other than just, you're fine doing the mechanic thing, you want to take a trip to Arizona, maybe you want to go see a concert, and it's literally like uh, a week ahead at a time, if that.
yeah. I mean, I have very vague goals. Like
Hmm.
my long-term goal right now is to travel as much as possible.
That's a great goal.
Yeah, I mean, one of the earliest things that my dad told me was that there's no better teacher than travel, and that's something I took to heart the moment I heard it.
Sure.
And that's
What's
why, or go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, I want to ask about the places you've traveled, but like continue with your thought, and then I'll follow up.
Well, yeah, I was going the same place. I love road trips. When I lived in Austin, I would
Hmm.
drive 12 hours to Albuquerque in one sitting. You know, no problem. Back and forth. I'd go to Lubbock. We go to Dallas, Waco.
Hmm.
Um, when I moved to Columbus, I spent a day in Nashville. I didn't need to do that. That was cool. Nashville kicks
Hmm.
ass.
You just got to see it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just I went up to Cleveland impulsively for a concert. It's only a 2-hour drive, so it
Hmm.
wasn't bad.
It's not
Um,
bad.
I went to Chicago on a whim. Never been to Chicago. Going to Arizona. It's just the things you learn just traveling is incredible, and it's not like educational learning or even street smarts. It's just the world is different a state away.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Experiential learning is something I think that is very valuable. Is simply, don't be afraid of a consequence. Just do the thing.
That's my biggest thing. Like it's people people who are afraid of failure are kind of frustrating to me
Mm.
Because like I mean, like I understand, I get it, and it's
Yeah.
totally understandable. But like the only thing you're gonna get out of failure is a learning experience.
Yeah. I mean, so from what I understand, I've heard tell that like if you want to become a master of something, you do it for 10,000 hours, right?
Mm.
And the secret of that is that 9,500 of those hours, if not more,
You're
are
gonna be
spent
fucking it up.
failing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the it's like the 3% of what's left is where you actually like have succeeded enough to be comfortable doing whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
At one point, somebody asked me, because I was talking about Mega Man 9, one of my favorite games of all time, and it's notoriously difficult. But I got to the
Hmm.
point where I could, cruise through this thing, and somebody's like, "Holy crap, how'd you get good at it?" And I just said, "I died way more than I succeeded."
Yeah. Yeah.
My failure to win ratio is absolutely skewed in the most terrible numbers, but that's how you do it.
Just play Dark Souls.
Just play Dark Souls. Yeah, exactly. Die 1,000 hours, never win the game, and feel like you've succeeded somehow. Yeah, absolutely. Um, yeah, no, I think that's really a great idea is to say just do it. Obviously, not everybody can do this. There's
Oh yeah.
a degree of privilege to saying just go out and see the world. But if not the world, maybe a different state, maybe a different city in your state.
Hmm.
Heck, maybe a building you've never been to in your city. You know,
Take a different drive home.
a different drive home. That's a great. Even that starting small. I think changing a routine, if you're able to,
Yeah.
even in the smallest degree, can maybe propel you to like feel more encouraged or able
Yeah.
to
That's
to try new things.
like if that's one of the things I've always done. Even like when I lived in Albuquerque, when I lived in Austin, when I lived here in Columbus, it's if I can't afford a trip, I'll just walk into a restaurant I've never been to, and I'll just have a
Sure,
meal.
sure.
I've done that everywhere I've lived. Only been disappointed a couple times, but
Yeah. And the worst comes to worst, yeah, like it's just food. I mean, and you could even start with a familiar restaurant and order something you've never ordered
yeah,
before.
it's
You
just
know?
you should just try new things.
Yeah, habit is exciting. Habit is comforting.
Yes.
But I've actually tried to make it a goal this year to oftentimes do new things, even if it's small, just to try something that I haven't done before. You know, new menu item on a restaurant. Um, yeah, that's fantastic. That's great advice in general, I think, because there's so many degrees to which we can just mix up our day, even if it's one small thing.
Yeah, and it's easier than a lot of people think uh insofar as bigger changes. Um, but it's never easy. Things are going to be difficult, but
Sure.
that's why you should do it.
Yeah. Where do you want to travel? What's a place that you've been like thinking about that you're just like that's on the list? Like that's a milestone.
I have not stopped thinking about Chicago.
Chicago. Okay.
Chicago was so cool.
Great.
Like I have always loved big cities.
Hmm.
Like I Chicago is very much an East Coast style big city. They built up.
Mm-hmm.
The big cities I'd been to were like Denver, LA, big sprawling cities. That's just what we have in the West. Everything is big.
Yeah, very spread out. Yeah.
Yeah, and in Chicago, I spent like a few hours just walking down downtown Chicago, and
Hmm.
it felt like what I imagined New York to be.
So you haven't been to New York? Is that kind of a goal for you as well?
Yeah, I would love to go to New York. It's only
Cool.
8 hours away.
That's not bad actually, all things
Everything is
considered.
so close over here, dude. It's crazy. When I
Yeah.
left, I drove 8 hours. I was still in Texas.
Yeah, that's true. Texas is as long as like a drive from any place on like the East Coast.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a six
That's
hour drive to Chicago, which blew my mind. There's a state in between me.
yeah. Okay, so bigger cities. What about something say like Tokyo or Beijing? Like what about like these? Is there international cities sort of on your docket at some
Oh,
point?
Japan is a dream trip.
That's a dream
Always
trip,
has been.
sure,
I would love to go to Canada, which is extremely doable now. I just need a passport.
sure.
Um, uh, Europe, like the UK, Ireland, just there's a lot of places I want to go. I definitely
Hmm.
want to visit outside the country.
Yeah,
Um,
you've never had the opportunity to go outside the country, correct?
yeah, never.
Okay. but you've got maybe that. So that could be like sort of like a general goal, no specific place, no specific order,
Mhm.
but the goal is to have the means to just say F it, pop on a plane and just go someplace else.
I could drive 4 hours being Canada.
Just that's true. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Well,
It,
so this is yeah, I'm sorry.
I lost it.
It's done. Yeah,
It's
exactly.
gone.
Immediate
There it
spur
goes.
of the moment. You were living in the moment so much
When
that
you
it's
take it from
immediately
me, it's gone.
well, that was my job was to say I'm going to disrupt your comfort.
Yeah.
That's what I did. I said, I'm going to wait until Byron speaks, and I'm immediately going to talk over him and make sure that he doesn't get to finish his sentence. Um, but I mean, so it sounds like people people are work in progress.
Yeah.
You've got some things on your plate that you recognize that you wish to address, and on top of like interpersonal things that you're working on, you also have a nice sort of, and we'll say security, like, but security in so much as like it's not, you know this is where you're going to get your retirement from necessarily,
Right.
but in this moment you've got a job that you like that supports what you want to do enough to get you to the next whatever it is.
Yeah, the fact that I can transfer it helps me a lot.
Oh,
And
that
even
is
it,
nice actually.
yeah, I
Yeah.
transferred from Austin to Columbus, and even if for some reason I couldn't transfer through Penske, I have experience in a trade. I can get a job anywhere.
Oh, that's pretty great. That's pretty great. Yeah, I think even opening up yourself to like having the possibility of if this company itself was not coming up, you
Mm.
still have enough to be like, look, I'm quite qualified at a variety of other places.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's super cool. Okay. Well, as I don't know if you've listened to any of the other podcasts. If you have not, that's totally fine.
I've listened
But
to a couple episodes.
oh, good. Okay, so you kind of know that like I'm about to barrage you with a handful of questions.
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay. I don't know if you've prepared it all or
Nope.
if like we're just truly winging it. All right. Very good. Very good. So what I did want to ask you to sort of wrap
Yep.
this up in the next, however long it takes, is I'm going to ask you 5 recommendations, and let's go ahead and start with what if you had to recommend these to anybody.
Mhm.
Let's go ahead and start with a book recommendation.
I got I got two of my favorite books.
Two of your favorite books. All right.
One of them is called The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien. It's memoirs from a Vietnam vet.
Hmm.
And he's an unreliable narrator.
I gotcha.
And it just goes in depth in, the things he experienced, and he acknowledges in it's a collection of short stories more than a cohesive narrative. And he
Sure.
acknowledges in multiple that, he's lying. For example, like uh he watched this one soldier not save this other one, and then later on in the book he's like, no, that was me. I let that man die. And
Interesting.
it's just this really interesting and gripping tale. And I've always been interested in like historical wars, Vietnam being one of the ones I've always found most interesting.
Sure.
So that one's always connected with me, and it's a really good insight into the Vietnam War, veterans, PTSD, and
Yeah.
also the nature of constructing a narrative in and of itself, the nature of writing.
Yeah, that's hearing about wars is generally through like the lens of like media coverage, and you get personal accounts occasionally, but it sounds like
Mm.
for somebody to really like go in depth about what their experience was like, but also struggle to like be forthcoming at
Yeah,
moments where it's almost like, it's very difficult and very human.
yeah, and he has stories where, in the middle of war, in the middle of a battle, he has stories of, his unit just lost this guy, so they're killing a buffalo. He has a story where he's just sitting on a boat with this old man, and he's just looking at the border of Canada because he's got
Hmm.
drafted.
Hmm.
And there's one where he tells a story of someone in his unit just driving around his old town, looking for someone to share his stories with. And it's a really beautiful book. I've read it numerous times. If you're into audiobooks, Bryan Cranston narrates it. It's fantastic.
Oh, that'd be great as well too. Audiobooks I know can help a lot of people, myself included, who have a hard time focusing reading sometimes.
Yeah.
And what's this one called once more?
The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien.
The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien. Okay,
Mm.
amazing. And you said you had another book as well.
Yeah, it's Jeanette McCurdy's book. I'm glad my mom died. That book fucked me up.
So you know what? I've actually heard several people recommend this, and I went to look for an audiobook version. And I don't have any of like the programs, so I went onto YouTube and I typed it in, and someone's like, "Oh yeah, I've got this version right here," and then it was like some crappy computer narrated voice, and I was like, "I can't do this." So
if
I think I'm
you,
going to take the plunge and go to Audible or something.
yeah, if you
Actually,
have Audible, Jeanette McCurdy reads it.
that's even better,
So
and I think I
it's
want that.
yeah. I heard an interview where she was like arguing with their editors because the way she writes it in some parts is not the proper way, but she's like, no, it needs to read this way. So
That's how
having
she
her
intended
read
it.
it,
Yeah.
yeah, is much better. And that's how I listened to the book. I just bought a physical copy like a week ago.
Okay.
Um,
But you heard
but
Audible first.
yeah, I listened to the audiobook and it
Cool.
was beautiful and devastating and it was just
Yeah.
so honest and raw and it got to me in a way I wasn't expecting. I was just interested because it's like, oh, that's the girl from iCarly, like
Sure. Yeah.
I was not expecting it to hit me as hard as it did.
Yeah, that sounds like a great book, and I think it's one that I want to get into. And I've had a couple recommendations, and now with yours, that's cemented my decision to actually just pop on Audible and start getting more regular circulation of audiobooks. But
Mhm.
that one's gonna sort of escalate to the top of the list, I think.
Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic read.
Okay, perfect. Great. Okay, so a good couple of books. It sounds like they're sort of on different ends of like a spectrum
Mhm.
for what kind of like story they're telling,
Yeah.
story as it were. Very good. Now, this is one that I know we could talk about for a million hours, but I'm going to have you sort of like tone it down to like, you know, I guess your top 200,000.
Okay.
But if you, yeah, we'll make it easy for you. Um, but if you got to recommend a movie or TV show, one or the other, or both,
Oof.
right? Yeah, this is not going to be an easy one, but like
Um,
something that maybe even in this moment, it could be something you saw a day ago that really resonates right now, or 10 years ago that you still think about. What's a movie or a book, or excuse me, a movie or a TV show?
my current favorite movie, which knocked over a lot of others that were close, is Everything
Hmm.
Everywhere All at Once.
You know what? And that just
That,
won a bunch of Oscars
yeah,
for
no,
very good reason.
yeah. If you think the Oscars is rigged, watch that movie. The Oscars are still probably rigged, but like that movie
Right.
deserves all of those Oscars.
Yeah, that's actually it's true. And a very very impressive a piece of work by a lot of incredible Asian actors
It's just
and writers and directors. It was just a terrific film. Okay, but I
yeah,
don't want to glow about it. I want you to tell me all about it.
it's that I wasn't expecting. Like I knew Daniels. I saw Swiss Army Man. I was like, this is gonna be a fun movie.
Yeah.
That movie is beautiful in every sense of the world. The way it's shot, the writing, the acting, everything about that movie I would not change. Which is like,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it goes into a lot of discussion about like relationship with one's parents, which I think is a really fascinating one for you to have chosen, considering our conversation.
well, the thing that interested me about it because I saw it with my ex girlfriend, and
Hmm.
we had two completely different takeaways from the movie,
Hmm. Even
and they
better.
both lined up with our personal philosophies, which are also sort of opposite. Um,
Sure.
hers was, if I'm remembering this correctly, it was like if you have an obligation to do good by the people in your life,
Hmm.
which
Hmm.
I don't disagree with.
Sure.
And my major takeaway was that nothing matters, so you get to pick what matters.
Sure.
Yeah. And it's
And
just
to think of those two things coexisting,
yeah, absolutely. Like
you
these
know?
are not mutually exclusive statements,
Sure.
but
Yeah,
we
that's
just
great.
pulled different themes from this movie.
Yeah. And I mean, and that's I think some of the best kind of art and why this movie might be worthy of everything that it very rightfully earned
Oh, absolutely.
is that like the takeaways for everybody. I went and saw it with a friend who had lost his dad not long before, and so that movie resonated highly on a completely different level.
Yeah, and
You
it's
know,
anytime I see someone talk about this movie, they're always talking about a different thing,
sure,
and I always understand where they're getting it from. It's not like
yeah,
I haven't seen a misinterpretation yet.
yeah, yeah. It is truly some of the best art that is out there. So everything, everywhere, all at once. Great choice. If you haven't seen it by now, do yourself a favor and
It's so
absolutely
good.
hunt it down and check it out. It is worthy of the Oscars that you got.
Yeah, that's my current favorite movie now. The
Okay.
ones I was always speaking to. I had a sort of archetype of favorite movies growing up, and it
Hmm.
was the ones with gifted assholes.
Oh,
Like
sort of like uh, what's the one with Matt Damon?
Good Will Hunting. That was
Good Will
when I was
Hunting.
gonna
Yeah, is
name
that
that.
okay?
That's first. It's just a beautiful movie. I love that movie. Gus
Yeah,
Van Sant is one of my favorite directors.
yeah.
Um, but just that movie to this day hits me emotionally.
Hmm.
Um, Another one is Donnie Darko, which is different but the
Oh,
same sort of character archetype between
sure.
Donnie and Will
Hmm.
relates there. Um, those two are the major ones. I was also really big on The Outsiders,
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, yeah.
and then oh, Rocky, obviously.
Rocky, yeah,
Yes.
which is also
Oh,
just sort of like this evergreen kind of like film that you could always watch it and always be like, wow.
I think Rocky One is a perfect movie. Also,
I agree. I don't disagree in any way.
I think Rocky Balboa is better, but Rocky One is perfect.
I also agree with that. Yeah, yeah. Rocky one's the best Rocky. Rocky Balboa is my favorite Rocky.
Yeah.
That's sort of what it comes down to. Great. Okay, so you've got a healthy selection of movies that you you sort of have like this type and the style, and that's really
Hmm.
that's
My
very
primary
very
hobby
cool.
is media consumption.
Media consumption. Yeah, no, I get it. Yeah. Well, it's great because speaking of consumption, I want to know if you could recommend a food. This could be a local restaurant. It could be a restaurant wherever you are, local to Albuquerque, local to Ohio, local to, I don't know, Timbuktu.
Hmm.
Heaven forbid. I don't think you've been there. Um,
It'd be kind of cool.
that would be kind of cool. Or you could just be like, I really like this specific Hungry Man meal in the frozen section at Walmart. Like what's a food that either you just it's like a comfort food or you crave it or it's just one of those, recommend a
Uh,
food to me.
the double steak grilled cheese burrito from Taco Bell.
Double steak grilled cheese burrito from Taco Bell.
Yes. I
Got it.
eat that way too much. It,
How often is too much?
multiple times a week.
Okay, I was gonna
And
say
then they,
multiple times a day would be really
yeah,
impressive, but times a week would actually okay.
and then
That's
they took it off the
reasonable.
menu for like a couple weeks, and I was really upset. But it's back.
It's back already. Well, the Taco Bell CEO listened to this podcast
Yeah,
and he was like, "We got to figure this out for
yeah.
Byron."
Its burrito is so good.
Okay, I haven't tried that one before. Actually,
It's
that sounded
really
really
good.
delicious.
For a real dish, birria tacos wherever you get them. That's
Whoa, a real dish. You're calling out Taco Bell?
yeah. It's you know what they did for that burrito? They took their same five ingredients and put them in a different order.
Oh, it's like a remix.
That's all Taco Bell menu is.
I suppose that's true. It's just five things with 80 variations.
With the exception of the Mexican pizza. The Mexican pizza is
That's
the only Taco Bell item with a unique ingredient. Did you know that?
an actual. I did not.
It's the Mexican pizza sauce.
Oh, it's a unique sauce exclusive to it.
Yeah.
Okay, okay. I didn't know that. I've never gotten a Mexican pizza from there.
I tried it once and I didn't like it. It's the only thing my
That's
dad
fair.
gets.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
So that's why you guys had a falling out for a bit.
Yeah,
Was
no, he did
he loves it and you're like,
he
no, no
lied to
way.
me.
He lied to you. Yeah, this is delicious, son. You'll love it. Yeah. Okay. So but also birria tacos, which, um,
Oh,
they're all obviously all over the place here in Albuquerque. But are you able to find those out in Ohio anywhere?
it took me a long time.
You did find
It was
something. Okay.
it's so hard to find Mexican food up here. Like
That
when
makes
I
sense.
yeah,
Yeah.
when I first moved here, my friends were like, "We're gonna take you to this taco place," and I was like,
Hmm.
"Oh boy." They took me to this place. I'm gonna name and shame this place called Condado Tacos. Food was fine. It tasted good. It's not a taco. It was like
Oh, gotcha.
it was fancy Taco Bell.
I see.
When you say
Yeah.
we're going out for tacos and margs, I want my corn tortillas. I want all
Right.
that. This is
Yeah. You
fancy
want the New
Taco Bell for
Mexican tradition.
much too much.
Okay, but still good,
Oh,
just
it
not
tasted good.
authentic.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're like, we're getting tacos. Like, you know where I'm from, right?
Yeah. Right. Exactly. Yeah, and I sometimes feel like a snob when I'm out someplace outside of New Mexico, and it's just like, oh yeah, you think you know. And I've been humbled a couple times too.
Oh, you can find it. You just have to look.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, so you found some birria tacos out there at the
Yeah,
very
there's
least.
a food truck that I go to also way too much.
So with a food truck, are they always in the same spot, or do you have to like hunt them down in the city?
This one's always in the same spot. There
Okay.
are a couple that move around.
Do you think it needs to be a food truck if it's always in the same spot, or could you just be like, look, just open up a restaurant already because you're
Yeah, open up a restaurant in this Shell parking lot.
in the okay, yeah, yeah, just construct a shed from Lowe's or
Yeah.
whatever and just use that. Okay, perfect. Okay, so birria tacos and the double steak cheesy
Grilled cheese
burrito,
burrito.
grilled
Grilled
cheese
cheese
burrito.
burrito.
Got it, got it. I'm gonna try one of those probably tomorrow then.
They're so good.
Okay. And now, one of my favorite questions of all time, one that we could also discuss for a billion hours, which we won't.
Says you.
But well, yeah, that's true. I suppose we could later, unless we want this episode to be just sort of like the benchmark that everybody has to hit at some point.
Everlasting.
Exactly. Yeah, 16-hour podcast. Um, what about a favorite video game? Could be a current favorite, could be an old time favorite, a nostalgic favorite, whatever it is.
uh, well, my favorite series of all time is the Yakuza series. Now, Like a Dragon. Well, I guess
Yakuza
all of.
Like a Dragon, right?
Well, the, like they go by Like a Dragon in the West now.
Yes, yeah, they've
Yeah,
been the
but
official
most people will
title.
likely know it as Yakuza. That
Sure.
series is so emotional,
Yeah.
which most people aren't gonna realize when they see clips because it's just you doing goofy shit.
Yeah, punching tigers in a
Yep.
casino or whatever.
Punching tigers, doing karaoke, going to
Yeah,
like a hostess club, but like that.
racing RC cars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You see a man come out of a sewer and drag and try to fight you,
Yeah.
but
It's
like,
cool about Yakuza is it's basically side quest the game.
yeah, and when you the character arc of a lot of these characters is so good. Like the
Yeah,
writing is fantastic. I have cried numerous times playing this series.
sure.
I've played Yakuza 6. It's not even my favorite Yakuza game. I've played it the most because the ending will make me cry like a baby every time.
Amazing. Yeah, and there's
Eh,
there's multiple games. There's a lot of games in this series,
There's
prequels and
there's
side stories.
8 mainline games now, and
Yep.
there's Dead Souls on PS3. They just remastered Ishin, which is one of
Hmm.
the samurai spin-offs, and there's another samurai spin-off.
Yep. And then we have Judgment, which is like
Oh,
parallel in the
Judgment,
universe.
Lost Judgment,
Lost Judgment,
and it's
right?
just these these games tackle really, really heavy topics a lot of the time, and they do it
Yeah.
extremely well and respectful most of the time.
Yeah.
They're like the earlier games are a little dated in their writing. Like
Sure. Yeah.
Yakuza 2 is very racist. Or xenophobic, I
Yeah.
guess, more than racist, but
Yeah. And what's interesting is I don't remember the exact content of Yakuza 2 'cause I haven't played it probably since it originally released on the PS2. But because they take place in Japan, I also know that like Japan has a problem with xenophobia and racism, so it
Mhm.
could be something that is not necessarily written out of ignorance, but written as in terms of an accuracy. But I don't remember specifically the context, so I can't actually
Well,
say.
Yakuza Kiwami 2 has like a warning in front of it now,
Hmm.
because the an overarching theme is the Yakuza are good because they keep the Koreans out.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, for a series that also takes place in what I think it's like the 80s.
Kiwami 2 is in the early 2000s.
Kiwami 2. Okay, so okay.
Yakuza 0 is the one in the 80s.
Oh, that's right. Yakuza Zero is in the 80s. Okay, so because the more contemporary ones, they do have like cell phones and things like
Right.
that. That's right. Okay, okay. Um, yeah, I don't remember again like the context exactly, but that's
Mhm.
an interesting disclaimer, given that yeah, like you know, a lot of foreign countries have racism that they don't want to
Yeah.
acknowledge. Like America still currently has a very big racism
Yeah.
problem. Other countries are not exempt from this, so it's interesting to sort of see it addressed in a video
Yeah,
game.
and Yakuza is probably the best piece of like virtual tourism.
Sure.
And it's like I've seen like videos of people walking around the cities these areas are based in, and they're practically identical.
The actual like Kamurocho or whatever, and
Yeah,
you're just like, wow, this is like
it's
they nailed it.
Kabukicho in
Kabukicho.
Tokyo, yeah,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Dotonbori,
Hmm.
and they're the same. You got the giant crab sign. You got that one parking garage in Kamurocho. That's all there.
Yeah,
And it's
yeah.
weird, like it's identical. Um, but
Go
the
down to
thing,
the Don Quixote and buy
yeah,
souvenirs. Yeah.
and the thing I like about Yakuza the most is the characters and their arc. Like Kazuma Kiryu falls into my favorite character trope, which
Hmm.
is grumpy old man adopts small child.
Yeah, that's basically it. Yeah,
And then he
it's sort
adopts
of like
7 more.
Big Daddy Japan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just like it's and these characters are typically, they're very not morally gray but struggling with their own morality
Yeah. Which
and
is the best
just
kind of writing, I think, is
yeah,
really making them human and not like explicitly, I'm a good guy, I'm a bad guy. Like,
yeah,
yeah.
and like it's interesting the way they're written because like Kazuma Kiryu has such a self-image problem
Hmm.
and he's struggling with that. He's struggling to be dad to this girl that he just found next to a dead. Or no, she was holding a gun when he found her
Right.
in a bar like filled with bodies, and just like that, his growth from ex yakuza to like full time dad who keeps getting dragged into the yakuza business is just
Hmm.
it's he's probably my favorite character, if not in
That's
these top
fair.
five.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny that you actually say that because, like the John Wick series has just like concluded. And it seems like as somebody who constantly sort of gets dragged back into a life that they were
Yeah.
ready to be done with, I wonder if the John Wick, creators actually played Yakuza at any point and thought, yes, this, but with Keanu Reeves.
Yep. It's like that. Uh, it's the same thing with the new God of War series. Very
Oh yeah,
similar
that's
situations.
a really good sort of theming. And Yakuza, especially being spread over, like you said, I mean, we've got like 10 games,
Mhm.
if not more, across the entire series, side stories included. Um, you have a lot of narration, and these games are not just like short games with a ton of side quests.
No,
They're
they're very
actually
long.
really in-depth games all over the place.
Yeah, and it's and Kiryu's not always the main character too, but everything
Right.
ties back to these same central themes. And one of the themes, like the major themes that I really enjoy about Yakuza, is the way they handle masculinity.
Yeah, that's a good talking point. It's evolved over the series of like having been out in what, like 2005,
The first one came out in like 2001, 2000, no,
2001.
2003,
I
very
can't
early
remember
2000s.
exactly. It was, yeah, sometime in the 2000s. But for that to have evolved over all these years, but also to address that and discuss
Yeah,
that.
and the thing about it is because these characters, they're all in their 40s, 50s in the later games,
Hmm.
and they subscribe to these old ways of masculinity.
Hmm.
They're stoic, they're at times violent,
Hmm.
and they over the course of this entire series, you see these men show incredible emotion. They're
Hmm.
not afraid of showing this emotion most of the time, and they only get more vulnerable. They get, they grow. Like there's so many games and these characters grow so much throughout the
Yeah.
series. You
Yeah.
don't see that quite as often, and especially not in older games.
Yeah.
These are not these are very far from two-dimensional characters, even the characters that only show up in one game.
Yeah. Yeah, seeing character growth in media in recent years has been something really cool and really encouraging because it shows you that like even a fictional
Mhm.
character is written to like become better or at least want to or
Yeah.
try to or struggle to instead of just saying that's just how it is. That's just who he is,
Yeah, and
you
it's like
know?
like again going back to God of War, Kratos is one of the best examples of this.
As a
For
phenomenal example.
five games, three mains and two like PSP spin-offs,
Yeah.
his character trait was angry.
Yeah.
That was it. He was the definition of a two-dimensional character. And
Yep.
God of War PS4 came out, and you're like, whoa, who are you?
Yeah, they address it so directly. Even he
Yeah,
acknowledges it in the game. He like looks at like this life once lived and just like, holy crap, I don't even want to like think about it.
yeah. And did you play Ragnarok?
Yep.
There's not getting into major spoilers here, but there's that scene
Hmm.
where he sits down with Atreus and he's like, "I'm falling back into my old ways." That little speech
To be
was
able to
so
acknowledge
good.
that
Yeah,
is huge. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, Yakuza is a great choice, a great series. It's available in a variety of places. I think
they're
I
all
know
on
it's
Game
on
Pass.
all on Game Pass. I don't know if they're on the PS Plus
I
Premium,
think so.
but however you can acquire these games, I would highly recommend it, especially at your recommendation.
Mhm.
They really are like these benchmark of high quality, well put together games, and like you said, character development is
Yeah,
just through the
you've
roof.
got the best of both worlds. You've got AAA storytelling,
Yeah.
You've got really good combat in most of the games. 3 and
Yeah.
4 are a little dated because they're just remasters of PS3 games.
Sure. Sure.
Um, and you got a bunch of weird, goofy shit.
Yeah.
It's
Some of
everything
the
you want in a video game.
Yep. You can hire a chicken to become your like building manager.
Property manager.
Yeah. Yeah,
Get him
and
by
that
getting
sounds
a
weird.
turkey in bowling.
You get a turkey in bowling, and yeah, he joins you. Yeah, the games it's like the perfect blend of like there's a genuinely serious, great story and ludicrous nonsense, like all in one, but it works. It's kind of like it's very Metal Gear in that regard.
And the thing about Yakuza and its side stories is they all serve character growth.
They
Almost all
do.
of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
all give you insights into who these characters are, their motivations, what they do, what they think.
The world around you, how people respond to even like mundane seeming
Hmm.
things. Yeah, it's kind of cool like that. There's even a philosophy of like humanity in
Hmm.
Yakuza. They are written very well. Yeah, that's a great choice. Well, finally, the final question is, and this is just for people that are out there, and maybe this is something that you want to ask yourself or tell yourself or hand to somebody because you've learned it well in however you have. What is some advice that you would want to give just for anybody who's having a hard time out there?
The first thing that comes to mind is something I heard off a YouTube video of these guys playing VR chat with this little kid.
Oh,
And they're
yes.
just being, real friendly with this little kid. Like, it's really cool to see that. But he's talking to this kid. He's just interviewing him and stuff. And the last thing he says, he's like, "Hey, Jordan, if you could say one thing to the world, what would it be?" And Jordan goes, "If someone hates you, don't hate them. Do good, die great."
It's incredible how simple that is. I think it's easy for people to like say, well, it has to be bigger or deeper to be more meaningful, and it doesn't. In
No,
fact, Jordan, that however old this kid is,
I think he was like
that's
5 when that
yeah,
video
it's
came out.
great advice.
Yeah, and it's just especially the when he says "do good, die great." That is something that
Yeah,
I have had on pretty much everywhere. Like
you're
it's
probably gonna
in
get a
it's
tattoo
in,
of that on your neck pretty soon.
I'm getting a tattoo of it in Phoenix.
On your neck?
No, not on my neck.
Oh, okay. Well, that's disappointing to me.
But
But where are you gonna get it?
uh
Gums?
inner arm. Yeah. We get it
Oh,
on my
okay. Yeah,
tongue.
I was gonna say some place where people can see actively. You can hide your arm, but you can't hide your teeth. Like
Can you
you should.
catch your teeth?
I could get like a sharpie and then like put like a gloss on them or something like a,
Just
a
enamel.
glaze of some sort. Yeah, exactly. So kind of, yeah. And you could probably fit that on your teeth. Do a good digrade across all your top teeth.
Yeah. There's enough.
Okay,
There's enough letters.
there's enough teeth. Yeah, yeah. That's fantastic. I really do think that's a great, simple and very fine philosophy. If somebody hates you, don't hate them.
I don't know why that video stuck with me so much, but it has since the first time I saw it.
It's good. You know what also helps, to be totally honest, is that like it's done through VR chat and watching them like run around as like these cute little creatures.
Yeah.
It sort of gives you, if it were just voices, it would still be a good clip, but you have
Mhm.
like this little like angel kitty thing. I can't remember exactly what the avatar was.
Yeah, it's a little
Um,
angel cat. I'm getting the
it-
the head of it and then do good, die
okay,
great under
good.
it.
Yeah, that's great. I really think that there's something about that resonates well, and great advice.
Yeah.
Great advice. Excellent. Well, Byron, I want to thank you for taking the time to not only join me, but for actually messaging me and reaching out and saying, "Hey, can we do this podcast?"
Yeah.
I think it's important for me to get back in the habit of like maintaining doing this. It had been a couple months, and so for you to sort of help me re-kickstart that is also, I think, very good for me. And so I want to thank you for basically helping reboot. It's called Humanity Tsukuru 2. Um, it's going to be incredible.
Can I be an executive producer now?
You please, yeah, I need a producer for this very badly. Yeah, send me all your residuals every month, and we'll be good to go.
Okay.
um, But yeah, no, I really want to thank you for being part of this podcast. But I also want to know, where can people find you? I mean, if you have like any sort of public, I don't know if you want to share Instagram or YouTube or Twitter or anything like that. If you don't, great. But also, if people wanted to find you, do you have a place for that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on Facebook. I can't promise I'll add you back. I'm on Instagram and Twitter,
Fair.
under Sir Scooter.
Hmm.
That's essentially it. I don't really do anything of note.
That's right. You just post the occasional picture of yakuza or a burrito.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
Sometimes ramen if I'm feeling spicy.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, would it be spicy ramen or is it like cool ramen, but you want to be like
Oh, it's
the
ice cold.
you
I'm the spicy one.
ice cold? You refrigerate it first.
Yeah.
Okay. That's good. That's good.
No, it's
Uh,
not. It tastes bad.
I mean, you could like a popsicle, like on a hot summer day, you could have your little
You just melt
frozen
it.
ramen. Yeah, ramen slush. Yeah, I think it sounds good. This summer, you should give that a go, and we'll revisit this podcast
Okay.
after that and see how it goes.
We'll see.
But yeah, thank you for being part of this. Thank you for being a great longtime friend and
Yeah.
somebody who's had the chance to share a lot of great experiences with, and someone that I've gotten to see grow in a variety of ways over many years. You know, with you and your family, and
Yeah, when we met, I was 18.
yeah. Oh, you like to bring up very frequently how how to make me feel old. Yeah, is usually what it comes down to. Yeah.
uh,
So thank you for that.
yeah, when did you graduate
Um,
high school?
oh geez, 2000.
I was 3.
Nope, don't say that. Yeah, podcast canceled. I'm deleting this right now.
Yeah, man. I mean,
Uh,
thank you for having me because I this is something that's gonna help me a lot. Just putting stuff out there publicly, which is something I've been trying to
Absolutely.
work on.
I
So,
encourage people to find a method to do the same, whether it's writing or talking to somebody, going to a therapist, or even recording. You know,
mhm.
make a YouTube vlog, make a private vlog. You know, there's a variety of ways. But I think the best thing you can do for yourself is to, if you have stuff stuck inside that you do not know how to handle, lay it out in front of you as best you can, and then try to like critically look at it from there. It's the best number one step to seeing like where you go from there,
Yeah,
as far as I'm concerned. So yes, thank you, Byron. Thank you for being part of this podcast. Thank you for being a great friend, and thank you for helping create humanity.
thank you.
We'll see you guys next time. Take care.